There's a moment in your life when everything you thought you knew about family shatters in an instant. I wasn't ready for what I found when I walked into my house that day, and neither was my daughter. You think you're doing everything right until you realize someone else is rewriting your child's place in the world. I stayed silent too long, trusting the wrong people, but what I discovered made me do something I never imagined. And it changed everything. My name is Amber Wilson. I'm 32 years old, and I live in Seattle, Washington. My life has always been a constant dance between motherhood and career ambition. I've spent years climbing the ranks in digital marketing while raising Madison. People always ask how I manage it all, but the truth is, most days I don't. I just get through it by loving hard and hoping that's enough. Madison isn't my biological daughter, but she's mine in every way that matters. I adopted her after my cousin's tragic passing, stepping into motherhood at 24 when I was barely holding my own life together. That moment redefined my entire purpose. Madison is my world. She is my heartbeat, my why, and the center of everything I do. Our house was filled with laughter, shared meals, and inside jokes that only she and I understood. There were Friday night movie marathons, Saturday morning pancakes, and bedtime whispers of love. We weren't perfect, but we were safe. And that was all I ever wanted for her. Until I realized not everyone wanted the same. After I met Scott Henderson, life felt like it had given us a second chance. He adored Madison from day one, not just tolerated her, but cherished her. It made me believe we could be a family again, whole and accepted. His love was genuine. And for the first time, I stopped looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But shoes always drop, don't they? Sometimes, it just takes a while for you to hear the thud. If you've ever tried to balance it all, career, motherhood, and still show up with love every day, hit that subscribe button. I've got stories for you, and this one will stay with you. I'll never forget the day Scott proposed, not because of the ring, but because of what he said to Madison. He got down on one knee and looked her in the eyes before even turning to me. From his coat pocket, he pulled out a tiny heart-shaped necklace and said, "Madison, will you let me be your forever family?" I was already crying before he turned to ask me the same. He didn't see her as my baggage or a compromise. He saw her as part of the deal, someone to love, to raise, to protect. And Madison, sweet, trusting Madison, said yes through tears of joy. That necklace never left her neck. It became her shield, a symbol of belonging, of being chosen not just by me, but by him too. When we married, we made it official. Scott legally adopted her. It wasn't just paperwork, it was a vow. I remember holding her in my arms after the judge signed the final forms. "You have two parents now," I whispered into her curls. "Two people who will never let you feel alone again." That promise lived in every bedtime story Scott read, every lunchbox he packed, every "I love you" he said before school. We truly believed we had rewritten her story, rewritten our story with love. We didn't see the cracks forming beneath the surface, but sometimes love isn't enough to drown out what people choose to ignore. The first time I met Scott's parents, Robert and Eleanor Henderson, I wanted to believe they were just reserved. Eleanor brought Madison a doll, and Robert complimented her curls, but something in their smiles didn't match their words. There was a stiffness, like they were going through the motions for Scott's sake, not for hers. The time. I told myself they just needed to warm up. Not everyone is comfortable with instant families, I reasoned. Maybe it was generational. Maybe they were grieving their own version of what they thought their son's life would look like. But even then, I knew better. Mothers know. We hope we're wrong. Their comments were subtle at first. "She doesn't look much like you two," Eleanor said once, studying Madison's face. It wasn't a question, it was an observation laced with something unkind. Scott responded without hesitation, saying Madison was adopted, and I loved him more in that moment than I ever had before. But the sting lingered. Still, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. I told myself it was just an awkward adjustment. Madison didn't notice, or at least, I thought she didn't. Kids are perceptive in ways adults underestimate. They feel the unspoken just as sharply as the words, and little by little, Madison started asking questions number 80-year-old should ever have to ask. At first, it was easy to ignore the differences. Madison and Lily, Scott's niece, were just two little girls playing together, cousins close in age, laughing over board games and dress-up. But the cracks appeared early, at every birthday, every holiday, every family get-together. Madison's gifts were smaller, simpler, less thoughtful. Photos from family events started showing up on social media. Lily always front and center. Madison, if included at all, was blurry in the background or cropped out entirely. Once, they both received dolls from Eleanor. Lily's had real eyelashes and came with accessories. Madison's didn't even have shoes. I noticed. Scott noticed. We both said nothing at first. We told ourselves it was accidental, not malicious. Maybe they just didn't realize. Maybe they thought Madison didn't care. But you can't watch one child be celebrated while another is quietly ignored without that twisting something sharp inside you. Madison never said anything, but her eyes said enough. After one particularly brutal Christmas, where Lily received a brand new tablet and Madison unwrapped a coloring book, Scott pulled his parents aside. "She's my daughter," he said firmly. "Treat her like it." They nodded, smiled politely, denied everything. "You're being sensitive," Robert said. "We love both girls the same. But loving someone the same shouldn't feel this different. Favoritism doesn't always scream at whispers. It's a cookie offered to one child and not the other. It's a name said with joy, and another said like an afterthought. It's being asked about school, about dance class, about dreams, and then sitting silent while your cousin answers everything. That was Madison's world. She started to withdraw. Slowly, quietly, her spark dimmed. I tried to fill the gap with extra hugs, weekend adventures, whispered affirmations before bed. "You matter. You belong. You are so deeply loved." And she smiled when I said it. But it's hard to believe something the world keeps contradicting. Eleanor would gush about Lily's math skills and gloss over Madison's reading award. Robert would brag about Lily's recitals and forget Madison's art show even happened. Juan Day. Madison looked at me and asked, "Why doesn't Grandma want to bake cookies with me like she does with Lily?" I had no answer, only silence. Scott tried to bridge the divide. He spoke with them calmly, asking them to make more of an effort. He believed they would change. That deep down, they just needed time. I wanted to believe that too, but Chimi didn't sofanum. It just made their preferences more obvious, and what started as discomfort became something darker. When the Chicago conference landed on my calendar, I resisted. Madison had a recital coming up. Work travel already made me feel like I was failing on the home front. But this meeting was critical. A new client worth millions. My team needed me. Scott reassured me we'd be fine. "Madison and I will build that birdhouse," he promised. Then came the wrench. Scott's own emergency trip to Boston, a client crisis of his own. Suddenly, we were scrambling for childcare. Our sitter was unavailable. My mom was recovering from surgery, and then Scott suggested the unthinkable. His parents, "They've been asking to spend time with Madison," he said. My stomach twisted. I remembered the favoritism, the microaggression, but we were out of options. "It's only 3 days," he said. "They raised 2 kids, they can handle it." I hesitated, then agreed. Maybe this was the chance they needed. One-on-one time with Madison. A reset, a fresh start. When they arrived, Eleanor smiled with her phone in her hand. "We've got it covered," she said, not even looking me in the eye. I knelt in front of Madison and whispered, "Just be a kid, baby. Don't worry about anything." She nodded. Brave, trusting. But I should have listened to my gut, because everything would unravel in just 3 days. The client signed early. What was meant to be a 4-day trip ended abruptly on the 3rd morning. Everyone else was thrilled we could explore Chicago, unwind. But all I wanted was to go home. Something gnawed at me, something I couldn't quite name. I needed to see Madison. I didn't tell anyone I was flying back. Not Scott, not my in-laws. I wanted to surprise Madison, catch her mid-laugh, hear her stories, make up for the days apart. I imagined her running into my arms, her curls bouncing, her smile bright, but an ease weighed heavier than excitement. As my plane descended, I tried calling the house. No answer. I texted Scott, heading home early. He responded from Boston. Still stuck. Love you both. That was it. Short, distracted. I felt alone, the kind of alone that tightens your chest and makes you question everything. Pulling into our driveway, I noticed something that didn't sit right. Eleanor Roberts' car was gone. No Madison waving from the window. No evidence of life inside. I stepped inside and called out, but the house was still. Too still. That silence. It screamed. And then I heard it. Faint sniffles and the sound of scrubbing. Nothing prepares you for finding your child like that. Madison's sweet, tender-hearted daughter was on her knees in the kitchen, scrubbing the tile floor with a bucket beside her. Her cheeks were flushed, streaked with dried tears, her tiny hands wrapped around a brush, knuckles white. She didn't even notice me at first, just kept scrubbing, as if her life depended on it. I stood there, stunned, frozen, my breath caught in my throat. When I finally said her name, she flinched, then turned, startled. That look in her eyes, fear, not surprise, not joy, fear. "Mommy," she whispered, as if she wasn't Tishura was real. I rushed to her, knelt beside her, soaked my knees without care. "Baby, what are you doing?" "I spilled grape juice," she said. "Grandma said I had to clean the whole floor. I wasn't careful enough." And then the bomb dropped. They'd taken Lily to Adventure World, roller coasters, cotton candy, and left Madison alone. Alone, at home, scrubbing a floor as punishment for a spill. She said Lily deserved it because she's their real granddaughter. Her voice cracked on those words. My heart broke in half. Then it caught fire. I wrapped Madison in my arms and asked the one question I didn't want to know the answer to. "How long have you been alone, sweetheart?" "Since after breakfast," she whispered. "They said they'd be back by dinner. I had to clean or I wouldn't get dessert." The room spun. I felt sick. For hours, maybe more. Alone. What if she'd hurt herself? What if she'd gotten scared? She was scared. But worse than fear was the look in her eyes. The belief that she somehow deserved it. That this was her fault. I asked her carefully, gently, "Did this happen the other days too?" She nodded. "Yesterday they went shopping with Lily. I couldn't go because I complained too much." And then the floodgates opened. New toys for Lily, extra chores for Madison, unequal meals, unequal love. And then came the words that shattered me. Grandma said I should be grateful you and Daddy took me in because nobody else wanted me. No child should carry that weight. No child should believe he disposable. I held her tighter, tears mixing with hers. She wasn't lucky we took her in. We were lucky she let us love her. I helped her stand. Her little body trembled. Her knees were red, raw from the tile. Her fingers wrinkled from water and chemicals. I helped her into a bath, gently washed her curls, soothed her chapped hands. She barely spoke, just looked at me with wide, searching eyes. We had ice cream for dinner, because I needed to see her smile. And she did tentatively at first, then fully, as the rainbow sherbet touched her tongue. I asked her to tell me everything, not just the worst, all of it. "Even if it makes you mad?" she asked. Even if, I promised. Especially if, slowly, her story unraveled. The praise Lily received, the scolding Madison got, being told she was difficult, ungrateful, not really family, being made to feel invisible while her cousins sparkled in the center of every room. She believed them. I saw it in the way she apologized for wanting dessert, for laughing too loud, for asking to join a trip. The world they built around her had made her shrink smaller, quieter, safer, but she wasn't safe. She was surviving, and I was done letting her survive in silence. Back home, I called Scott. I told him everything, from the grape juice to the floor, from the amusement park to the silence. He didn't believe me, couldn't believe me at first. But then I repeated Madison's words, her voice, her heartbreak. He went quiet, then furious. "They left her alone?" His voice cracked. "They told her she wasn't real family." He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply said, "I'm getting the first flight out. My daughter comes first. Not stepdaughter. Not Amber's daughter. His daughter. We had a plan.com, strategic. I'd confront them when they returned. No yelling, no drama in front of Madison, but they were leaving our house. Tonight, no second chances. No justifications. What they did wasn't just unkind, it was abuse, neglect. Scott and I stood together. No more tiptoeing, no more trying to keep the peace. Peace is worthless if it comes at the cost of a child's soul. I tucked Madison in and promised her one thing. You will never be treated like this again. Not while I'm breathing. And I meant every word. I sat on the couch, Madison asleep upstairs, the house dark except for the kitchen light. My heart raced, my fists clenched. Eleanor and Robert had no idea what they were walking into, but they would. Soon, I wasn't the same woman who left for Chicago. I wasn't asking for fairness anymore. I was demanding it. I wasn't hoping for respect. I would insist on it because a line had been crossed deeply, irreversibly, and my daughter had paid the price. I wouldn't let her pay it again. When their car pulled into the driveway, I stood tall. Eleanor with her shopping bags. Robert with Lily asleep on his shoulder. Laughing, smiling, oblivious, they walked in like nothing happened. Like the world hadn't just broken inside my kitchen, but I was ready. I cleared my throat. They turned. Their smiles faded. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Amber, what are you doing home? Robert looked confused. Where's Madison? I took a deep breath and stepped forward. She's upstairs recovering after 4 hours alone, scrubbing floors because you chose your real granddaughter over your actual responsibility. If you're still here, I want to thank you for listening to this part of my story. It wasn't easy to live through, and it's not easy to tell, but stories like this matter. So if you felt even a fraction of what I felt, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you'd like to support these stories reaching more people, go below this video and click Super Thanks. Every contribution helps us bring forward more voices like mine. Now, let me tell you exactly what happened when they walked through that door. The third morning of my trip began with a strange emptiness. I had just finished my final meeting when I received a surprise notification. The client had signed early. The rest of our schedule was canceled, giving me the unexpected chance to fly home. Instead of staying and enjoying the city, I felt an urgent pull to return. My heart told me Madison needed me more than ever. I booked the first flight I could, not even telling Scott or his parents. I imagined the joy on Madison's face when I walked through the door. It was supposed to be a happy surprise, a sweet reunion, but from the moment I landed, an unease started creeping in. My calls to the house went unanswered, and no one texted me back. Scott replied briefly when I told him I was flying home. Still in Boston. Love you both. I didn't want to push, but something in my gut told me all was not well. The closer I got to home, the heavier the air felt. It wasn't just motherly guilt, it was a primal instinct. Something was wrong, and I was about to find out what. The house was too quiet when I arrived. I called out softly, thinking maybe they were at the park or nearby, but no one answered. I dropped my bag and walked room to room. Nothing. No sounds, no movement, just an unsettling stillness. That's when I noticed Mr. Flopsy, Madison's stuffed bunny, abandoned on the floor. She never left him behind. I called her name, louder this time, my voice catching in my throat. Then I heard a faint scrubbing sound, like a brush scraping tile. It came from the kitchen. I rushed in, heart pounding, and there she was, my daughter, on her hands and knees, scrubbing the floor, tears dried on her cheeks. Madison didn't notice me right away. She was so focused, her small hand gripping the scrub brush, moving it in determined circles. A bucket of soapy water sat beside her, and her knees were red from kneeling. My breath caught in my chest. My baby girl, cleaning like a punished servant. The disbelief turned to rage. Madison, I finally managed to say. She jumped, the brush clattering to the tile as she turned. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Mommy," she whispered, as if unsure it was really me. I rushed to her side, not caring that my knees were now soaked with soap and water. I pulled her into my arms and held her tightly. Her small body trembled as she cried against me. "I spilled juice this morning," she said between sobs. "Grandma said I had to learn responsibility." She looked up at me. searching my face for signs of anger. She said I had to scrub the whole kitchen or I wouldn't get dessert. My fists clenched, fury boiling under my skin. "Where are Grandma and Grandpa now?" I asked as gently as I could. Madison's voice was barely a whisper. "They took Lily to Adventure World." My stomach dropped. "They said I don't deserve fun like Lily. She's their real granddaughter." I couldn't breathe for a second. Those words spoken so simply shattered something inside me forever. After Scott left for Boston, I kept reminding myself that everything would be fine. I trusted his parents to at least keep Madison safe. Even if they weren't exactly warm, but our video calls grew shorter and colder. The first night, Madison seemed okay but subdued. The second night, she didn't even come to the phone. Robert answered instead, claiming she was finishing dinner. He promised she'd call back, but she never did. When I tried again later, Eleanor picked up, visibly annoyed. She said Madison had gone to sleep early, tired from playing all day. Her tone carried irritation, not concern. Something about it twisted in my gut. Scott reassured me over text that they were managing fine. He said his parents had agreed to stay an extra day to help while he handled the crisis. It all sounded logical on paper, but something didn't sit right. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something, that my little girl wasn't okay. By the third day, I was restless and anxious. When our client signed the contract early, I took it as a sign. I didn't even tell Scott I just booked the first flight home. My heart thudded with every mile I flew, wondering what I would find. A mother knows when something isn't right, even from miles away. Touching DOI, messaged Scott, who was still in Boston. His response was supportive, but distracted. Driving home, every red light felt unbearable. The house came into view, oddly quiet, with no car in the driveway. Something was wrong. Deep down, I already knew I just didn't know how bad it would be. I entered the house, calling Madison's name, expecting a cheerful squeal, but silence answered me. Her stuffed bunny, Mr. Flopsy, was on the living room floor, a rare sight. I checked the kitchen, and that's when I heard it. A soft sniffling sound and the repetitive scrape of bristles on tile. My heart dropped. Turning the corner, I saw her. My 8-year-old daughter was on her hands and knees, scrubbing the kitchen floor. A bucket of soapy water sat next to her, and her little hands were red and pruned. Her hair clung to her forehead in damp curls, and her cheeks were streaked with dried tears. She didn't see me. I stood frozen, watching her small frame labor over a stain she could barely scrub away. When I finally spoke her name, she flinched, dropping the brush in panic. Her eyes filled with fear until recognition dawned. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. I crossed the room in seconds, kneeling beside her. I wrapped my arms around her, ignoring the wet floor. "Baby, what are you doing? Where are Grandma and Grandpa?" Her voice cracked as she answered. "They took Lily to the amusement park. I had to stay and clean. I spilled juice this morning, and Grandma said I needed to learn responsibility." She added that they told her only Lily deserved special treats because she was their real granddaughter. My vision blurred with rage. They had left my child alone in our house to scrub the floor like Cinderella and Madison. She truly believed she deserved it. That thought shattered something deep inside me. Trying not to scream, I asked how long she'd been alone. "Since breakfast," she whispered. "That meant 4 or 5 hours, maybe more. They said if I don't finish, I won't get dessert," she continued, almost as if explaining her homework. I guided her gently to the bathroom, my mind racing with fury and guilt. I cleaned her hands, careful with every touch. Her knees were red and scraped, and her palms were raw. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "did they leave you alone before?" She hesitated, then she nodded. "Yesterday, they went shopping with Lily. I had to stay home and think about my behavior." "Behavior? For what?" I steadied my voice, asking her to tell me everything. The new toys Lily got, how she wasn't allowed to watch TV, how Eleanor told her she should be grateful we took her in, that no one else wanted her. Each word was a dagger. The fact that she said it so matter-of-factly made it worse. We sat together as I listened. She wasn't just neglected, she was emotionally abandoned, made to feel like a burden. "You're not lucky we took you in," I said, cupping her face. "We're lucky to have you. You are my daughter, Always. Her eyes filled with tears. "You're not mad at me?" she asked. "No, baby. Never." I tucked her into the couch with a blanket and told her we'd get ice cream. But first, I needed to call Scott. I needed to take control. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. Those people would never be alone with my daughter again. After settling Madison on the couch with her favorite blanket and a warm cup of cocoa, I stepped into the hallway, gripping my phone with shaking hands. My fingers trembled not from fear, but from rage barely contained. I dialed Scott, desperate to hear his voice. When he picked up, I told him everything, every word Madison had shared. His silence was thick, broken only by the sound of his breath quickening. When he spoke, it was with a steel I hadn't heard before. "I'm getting on a plane tonight." His voice cracked with fury and shame. We talked strategy, how to protect Madison from another confrontation. They would be home soon, probably in time for dinner. I couldn't let them walk through that door like nothing had happened. Madison deserved better. We agreed on one thing. There would be no yelling, no screaming, but there would be boundaries and consequences. They had crossed a line. I hung up and paced the living room, checking the time every 5 minutes. Madison had drifted off on the couch, Mr. Flopsy tucked in her arms. Looking at her sleeping face made the stakes even clearer. My job wasn't to protect my in-laws' feelings, it was to protect my child's heart. Then I heard the familiar sound of tires crunching our driveway gravel. I stood, smoothing my sweater. I wasn't ready, but I had to be. For her, for us. The front door opened, and their laughter spilled into the house. Bags with amusement park logos dangled from their hands. My blood boiled. Eleanor jumped when she saw me standing in the living room. "Amber, what are you doing here?" she asked, feigning surprise. Robert followed behind, placing their bags down, while Lily wandered in, rubbing her eyes. The moment felt surreal. I was calm, but beneath that calm was a fire. "Where's Madison?" Robert asked, looking around casually. "Upstairs," I replied, resting. After scrubbing the kitchen floor for 4 hours, that landed like a hammer. Eleanor's face flickered, but she quickly masked it with indignation. "Oh, don't be dramatic. She made a mess. She had to learn responsibility." "Responsibility?" I repeated. "By leaving her alone for hours while you took Lily to a theme park?" Robert stepped forward, trying to mediate. "It wasn't like that," I cut him off. "Then what was it like, Robert?" "Because Madison told me everything. You made her feel like she didn't belong here." Eleanor scoffed. "Children exaggerate. And she's not even really—" She trailed off. I stepped forward. "She's not what?" "Not your real granddaughter." Her silence was the only confirmation I needed. The old defensiveness returned, but I didn't flinch. "You're not going to gaslight her. Or me. Not anymore." I pointed toward the hallway. "Pack your things. You're leaving tonight. You will not be alone with Madison again. Ever." Eleanor opened her mouth to argue, but I raised my hand. "Don't. Just go." For the first time, they realized I wasn't bluffing, and that shook them more than anything else. I didn't sleep that night. Madison eventually settled into bed, but I remained on edge, the house heavy with silence. When Scott arrived at midnight, I opened the door and fell into his arms. He held me tight, his shoulders tense. We didn't speak at first. We didn't need to. In the kitchen, I poured him coffee while recounting every detail. Madison's story, the floor, the bruises, his jaw clenched tighter with each revelation. "They're never seeing her unsupervised again," he said, eyes dark with resolve. "Not after this. Not ever." There was no doubt in his voice. We checked on Madison together, watching her sleep. Scott knelt beside her, brushing a curl from her cheek. "I'm so sorry, baby," he whispered. I turned away, tears spilling down my cheeks. This wasn't just about anger anymore. It was about rebuilding the trust we'd let be damaged. The next morning, over breakfast, we explained things carefully to Madison. "Grandma and Grandpa made some very bad choices," I said gently. "And when adults make bad choices that hurt children, there have to be consequences." Madison looked worried, but Scott reassured her. "This isn't your fault." Not one bit. She nodded slowly, her trust returning in pieces. We told her they wouldn't be staying with us anymore and that things would be different now. Safer, better. And in that small kitchen, over half a tin pancakes and spilled syrup, we began piecing our family back together, one moment of truth at a time. By the time I returned from Chicago, something gnawed at my instincts, though I tried to convince myself it was just travel fatigue. As I drove toward home, I imagined Madison's hug, her smile when I surprised her. But what I found was silence. No laughter, no cartoons on in the background, just a stillness that screamed wrong. I called her name, expecting her to leap into my arms, but there was only the sound of my own heartbeat growing louder. That's when I heard it, a faint sniffle and the rhythmic sound of scrubbing. I followed the noise into the kitchen, and there she was, my idle daughter, on her knees, scrubbing the floor, her hands red from chemicals, her face tear-streaked. My voice caught in my throat, but I managed to call her name. She looked up, startled, her fear dissolving into relief when she saw me. "Mommy," she whispered, and my world broke. I dropped to the floor, scooping her into my arms as the bucket tipped beside us. She clung to me like a lifeline, and I could feel her trembling. Her voice cracked as she tried to explain. "I spilled juice. Grandma said I had to clean the whole kitchen before dessert." But that wasn't the worst of it. They had taken Lily to Adventure World, left Madison behind, alone, on her hands and knees, because she wasn't their real granddaughter. My mind reeled. What kind of people look a child in the face and decide she's not worth a trip to an amusement park? Madison didn't even seem angry, just heartbroken. She had accepted it as if it were normal. That realization gutted me. I asked how long she'd been alone. "Since after breakfast," she whispered. I could barely breathe. That was hours. She had been abandoned, not forgotten intentionally, excluded. I held her tight, trying not to let my rage seep into my voice. "You are never alone again," I promised her, kissing her head. "Never." Madison asked if I was mad about the juice. That broke me more than anything. She thought this was her fault, that some spilled juice justified being left behind. I told her no one should ever make her feel that way. And that was when I made my decision. This wouldn't slide. I gave Madison a warm bath, noticing for the first time the rawness on her hands and red pressure marks on her knees. She tried to smile through it all, bravi as ive, but her eyes were dimmer. I gently washed her hair and reminded her how precious she was to me. She kept asking if Grandma would be mad at her. It was clear she'd internalized the guilt, and that frightened me more than anything. We went for ice cream, a small, simple joy. Rainbow, sherbet with sprinkles-y kind of thing she used to beg for. This time, she didn't even finish half. I asked her, gently, if anything else had happened while I was gone. That's when she opened up. Slowly, between licks and silences, she began to unravel the full truth of those days. It was worse than I imagined. Not just chores but exclusion, isolation, emotional neglect. Madison told me she was given different meals from Lily. Sandwiches, while Lily got her favorite nuggets. She wasn't allowed to watch TV, even when Lily was. They'd gone to a movie one afternoon and told Madison she had to reflect on her behavior instead. When I asked what behavior, Madison shrugged. I asked for dessert, like Lily got. She had started believing she didn't deserve equal treatment, that maybe it was her. Grandma had told her that being adopted meant she was lucky, that no one else wanted her, that she should be thankful we took her in. Madison didn't even flinch while saying this, just repeated the words with a kind of practiced resignation, as though she had heard them more than once. I wanted to scream, but I kept my voice calm. I needed her to feel safe. This wasn't the time for my outrage, it was time for her healing. Back home, I tucked her in and reassured her again. Over and over. I knew I'd repeat it every night if I had to. You are wanted. You are mine. And you are loved. She clung to Mr. Flopsy and asked if she was in trouble. "No, baby," I said, my voice cracking. "You are not the one in trouble, but they are," and I meant it. As she slept, I began pacing the hall. My anger sharpened into resolve. I tried calling Scott, but it went to voicemail. I texted him everything. The scrubbing, the abandonment, what Madison said. He called back as soon as he saw the message. I stepped into the bedroom and told him everything, sparing no detail. At first, he was quiet. Then came the fire. They left her alone, he said, his voice dark. They told her she wasn't real family. I confirmed it all. He was breathless with fury. I'm getting on the next flight. I don't care what's happening with Boston. It meant everything to hear him say that. My heart ached with relief. We agreed we would handle it together. No more hoping they'd come around. That era was over. Before hanging up, we coordinated a plan. I would confront them first, calmly but directly. They'd return for dinner, and I'd be waiting. Madison would be upstairs, away from it all. She'd endured enough. I told Scott I wouldn't yell. I'd be precise. Strong? I wouldn't let them twist it into another misunderstanding. He trusted me to take the first swing. I've got your back, he said. And hers. Always. I spent the next hour mentally preparing for war. Not with screaming, but with truth. When the door opened and they walked in laughing, bags in hand, I stood in the foyer, unmoving. Eleanor flinched. Amber, you scared me. I didn't flinch back. Madison's resting, I said, after 4 hours of scrubbing the kitchen floor alone. Silence. Then denial. She made a mess. She's 8, I said, and she was alone. That's neglect. Robert tried to defend it. She needed discipline. Eleanor rolled her eyes. Stop being hysterical. That was it. The moment I knew they were incapable of even pretending to care. She's not your real granddaughter, Eleanor added under her breath. I stared at her, cold. Then you're not her real grandparents either. They didn't speak. They just stood there, finally realizing this was different. This time, I wasn't asking for fairness. I was demanding it. The morning after the confrontation, the house felt different, quieter, but safer. Madison clung to me when she woke, hesitant but smiling. Scott had returned during the night, and seeing him at the breakfast table brought visible relief to her face. He pulled her into his lap and whispered something that made her giggle softly. The mood was fragile, but for the first time in days, our home didn't feel like a battlefield. Over pancakes, we gently recapped what happened, choosing our words with care. Madison listened intently, her eyes darting between us as we assured her that none of it was her fault. When we told her we'd be talking to a family therapist soon, she nodded as if already expecting it. Scott promised her she'd never be left alone with them again. Not ever. I saw her shoulders finally relax just a little. Later that afternoon, Scott took the first steps toward professional help. He made calls, did research, and secured a consultation with a therapist specializing in adoption and family trauma. I could see the toll everything had taken on him. His voice cracked more than once while relaying the details. But he was determined, no more brushing things off, no more excuses. We were in this together, fully present and fully committed. That night, we curled up on the couch as a family. Maji-san, now back in her favorite pajamas, asked if she could sleep with us just one more night. Of course, we said yes. As she nestled between us, she whispered, I feel safe now. I held back tears, stroking her curls, knowing that simple feeling had been ripped from her far too many times. Before bed, we drafted a letter not to send, but to clarify our thoughts. It detailed everything Madison had told us, every moment we'd witnessed, and the decision to protect her at all costs. Writing it was painful, but necessary. It reminded us of why we'd drawn this line in the sand. We couldn't undo what had happened, but we could make sure it never happened again. 2 days later, Scott received a surprising call from his brother, Michael. Until now, Michael had remained neutral, even distant, during the entire ordeal. But now his voice was low, serious, and laced with regret. Scott, Lily's been asking a lot of questions, he admitted. She, Mrs. Madison, and I think she's more aware of everything than we gave her credit for. Scott put him on speaker so I could listen, and I could hear the strain in Michael's voice. He said Lily had mentioned Madison being made to do chores while I played, something she'd said with confusion. Not cruelty. That little remark had unsettled Michael and prompted him to reach out. I want to understand what really happened, he said. And if my parents were out of line, I need to know. Scott didn't hold back. He laid it all out, piece by piece. The floor, scrubbing, the emotional manipulation, the bruises. Michael was silent for a long moment. Then he muttered, "Jesus, I had no idea it had gone that far." He sounded shaken, not just by what we'd told him, but by his own role in failing to see it sooner. He apologized sincerely, something I hadn't expected. He also asked if we'd be okay with letting Lily and Madison have a video call soon. Supervised. Of course, Madison overheard and lit up at the mention of her cousin. It was the first time I'd seen real excitement on her face in over a week. "Only if she wants to," I said, "but thank you for calling. It means more than you know." Later that evening, Lily and Madison chatted over video, giggling as they showed each other their favorite stuffed animals. Their connection was still there, untouched by the adults' chaos. Watching them made it clear. The damage was irreversible, not between the kids, at least, and Michael's support became a small but powerful crack in the wall Scott's parents had tried to build between us. Madison's first therapy session with Dr. Lorraine Carta was held 2 days later in a warmly lit office filled with toys and calming colors. She clutched Mr. Flopsy tightly as we sat in the waiting room, her fingers nervously twisting his floppy ears. I leaned in and whispered, "It's okay to talk. She's here to help." Madison nodded, eyes wide but brave. Dr. Carter welcomed us with a gentle smile and invited Madison to sit with her while Scott and I remained nearby. The session began with small talk, favorite movies, pets, what she liked to do for fun. Slowly, Madison opened up, her voice quiet but steady. When the doctor asked, "Has anyone ever made you feel like you didn't belong?" Madison simply said, "Grandma did." That sentence hit like a lightning bolt. Dr. Carter didn't flinch. She leaned in, validating Madison's feelings without judgment. "That must have hurt," she said softly. "Can you tell me more about it?" Madison recounted being excluded, criticized, and told she should be grateful. At each step, Dr. Carter gently reinforced that none of it was her fault. After the session, Dr. Carter spoke with us privately. "Your daughter is very resilient," she said, "but what she's been through is emotional trauma. It's going to take consistent reassurance and structure for her to rebuild trust, especially with extended family." We nodded, grateful for the insight. We weren't alone in this journey anymore. On the way home, Madison asked if she could go back to see Dr. Carter again. "She listens," she said simply. I reached back from the passenger seat to squeeze her hand. "Yes, baby, as many times as you want." It was the beginning of her healing and ours, too. There was no turning back now, only forward. The ripple effect of truth slowly spread through our family, reaching even those who initially stood by Robert and Eleanor. One by one, relatives began reaching out with quiet messages of support, admitting they hadn't known the full story. Some apologized directly to Madison, others to Scott and me, ashamed they hadn't questioned the narrative sooner. It wasn't easy confronting their own complicity and turning a blind eye, but it was progress. Madison, though cautious, appreciated every sincere gesture and step toward rebuilding trust. At school, Madison's teachers began noticing positive changes settle at first, then more pronounced. She raised her hand more often, joined group activities with new confidence, and even volunteered to lead a class project. It wasn't just therapy, it was the impact of finally feeling safe and seen at home. Her therapist, Dr. Carter, noted that Madison's drawings had changed too, from anxious scribbles to full-color expressions of joy and imagination. The healing was happening, quietly but powerfully, under the surface. Scott's relationship with his parents, however, remained distant. He continued to enforce the boundaries we'd set, despite mounting pressure from extended family to move on. He stayed firm, reminding everyone that forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting. Madison's well-being came first, and we weren't willing to compromise that for the sake of social appearances. Every time doubt crept in, all we had to do was look at Madison to remember why the line was drawn. Lily, in her own way, became a subtle ally too. Children see more than we think, and Lily began correcting Eleanor mid-sentence when she slipped back into old habit. "But Grandma, Madison likes that too," she'd say, gently but firmly, redirecting the conversation with an innocence only a child could get away with. These moments embarrassed Eleanor, but also slowly reshaped her behavior. perhaps more effectively than any adult confrontation could. Over time, we started attending carefully structured family events, ones where clear boundaries were in place. They weren't perfect, but they were no longer traumatic. Madison knew we had her back, and that changed everything. For the first time in years, she felt empowered rather than voiceless, included rather than tolerated. And in those small steps, we saw the future beginning to take shape, one built on truth, love, and accountability. Weeks later, we attended a community event where Madison's school choir was set to perform. It was a simple concert in the school gymnasium with folding chairs, paper programs, and kids in white shirts and black pants. But to us, it felt monumental. Madison had been working hard on her solo part, something she'd been nervous about, but proud of. That morning, she asked if Eleanor and Robert would be there, and for the first time, she didn't ask it with fear but with confidence. Scott and I sat front row, Madison's biggest cheerleaders, surrounded by parents chattering and waving phones in anticipation. Robert and Eleanor arrived late, slipping into seats further back. Their presence was quiet. Subdued, gone were the showy entrances and loud declarations. When Madison walked onto the stage, her eyes scanned the crowd. She spotted us first, smiled, then caught sight of them, and blinked. But instead of shrinking, she stood taller. The moment she opened her mouth to sing, the room fell silent. Her voice, clear and steady, carried through the gym like a promise. It wasn't just a song, it was her reclaiming space, using her voice, taking back what had been diminished. The final note rang out, and the crowd erupted in applause. Scott and I were on our feet immediately, tears in our eyes. Even Robert clapped it, his expression unreadable. Eleanor looked away, but she clapped too. After the performance, Madison ran straight into our arms. "Did I do okay?" she asked, breathless and beaming. "You were amazing," I told her, holding her tight. So proud of you." Nearby, Eleanor approached cautiously, a small gift bag in hand. "You sang beautifully, Madison," she said softly. Madison accepted the gift with a nod, polite but distant. There were no hugs, but there was a quiet civility more than we could have imagined months ago. That night, Madison talked about the performance nonstop. Not once did she mention her fear of judgment or not belonging. "I liked singing for everyone," she said. "It felt like my heart was outside my chest." Scott smiled at her and replied, "That's exactly what it should feel like when you're doing something brave." We knew then that she was beginning to heal in a deeper way, no longer defined by the wounds others gave her, but by the strength she found in herself. The biggest turning point came during one of our family therapy sessions. A few weeks after the choir concert, Dr. Carter invited Robert and Eleanor to join for a portion of the session, something we approached with caution, but hope. The goal wasn't to forgive or forget, but to model repair and responsibility in a safe, structured environment. Madison was prepared, armed with boundaries and a voice she had learned to use with strength. When Eleanor and Robert arrived, they were quieter than usual, subdued in a way that felt different from defensiveness. They listened as Madison spoke, sharing how she'd felt invisible, unwanted, and scared. Her words were calm, not bitter, just honest. "It made me feel like I wasn't part of the family," she said, "like I didn't matter as much as Lily." Eleanor's face crumpled slightly, her gaze finally meeting Madison's without judgment or denial. "I didn't know how much I was hurting you," Eleanor said. "I thought I was being fair, but I see now that I wasn't, and I'm sorry." Robert echoed her sentiment, admitting that he'd gone along with things to avoid conflict rather than standing up for what was right. For the first time, they weren't minimizing or explaining away. They were simply taking ownership, and that was a kind of healing we hadn't thought possible. Afterward, Madison asked, "Do you think Grandma really means it this time?" I looked at her and said, "I don't know, sweetheart, but I do know we're watching closely, and if they want to stay in our lives, they'll have to show it every single time." Madison nodded. "Okay. That's fair." It was a sign of just how far she'd come, learning that love isn't about blindly accepting hurt, but about honoring yourself enough to demand better. We ended that session with a shared goal: to rebuild, slowly and intentionally, without pressure or denial. Eleanor and Robert weren't magically transformed, but they'd taken a step in the right direction. And my This. She walked out of that room with her head high and her spirit intact. It wasn't the end of the journey, but it was the beginning of something new, a hope rooted not in fantasy, but in action and accountability. The day after the confrontation, the house felt lighter, like some dark presence had lifted. Madison slept deeply for the first time in days, her small frame finally at ease in her own bed. I stayed close to her, afraid that the safety she felt might slip away if I turned my back. Scott made pancakes that morning, her favorite, with chocolate chips and whipped cream. When she giggled at his attempt to flip one in the air, I knew healing had started. We kept things simple that week. No school, no work, just the three of us reconnecting. Madison started opening up slowly, sharing little details from those painful 3 days. Each moment she revealed took my breath away, but I let her speak without interruption. I learned that Eleanor had made her scrub the bathroom too, and that Robert had turned up the TV when she cried. These weren't isolated incidents. They were deliberate acts of cruelty. Scott and I scheduled an emergency session with a child therapist who specialized in trauma and attachment. Madison was hesitant at first, but the soft-voiced woman named Dr. Carter won her over with a therapy dog and some modeling clay. Watching my daughter talk about her pain while shaping little hearts out of pink dough broke and mended something in me all at once. Her words weren't dramatically, were almost numb. That scared me more than any tears could. Dr. Carter explained that Madison had internalized the mistreatment as normal. She said children often think they cause the behavior, especially when it comes from authority figures. The concept was devastating, but empowering. We could rewrite that belief. Scott and I committed 2 weekly sessions, both for Madison and for us. We needed tools, not just love, to undo what Eleanor and Robert had done. Madison made a drawing in one session of 3 stick figures, Scott and me inside a glowing heart. Outside the heart were 2 smaller figures, labeled them. When? Those? Carter asked who they were. She said quietly, people who used to make me feel small. I cried then, because I understood. She had finally drawn the line herself. Despite everything, one of Madison's first questions after therapy was, "Can I still talk to Lily?" That melted me. She wasn't angry at her cousin, just confused. We explained that Lily hadn't done anything wrong, but that visits would be different now. Madison accepted this with maturity far beyond her 8 years. "Okay," she said, "as long as someone nice is always there." Scott called his brother Michael to explain. To our relief, Michael was furious with their parents and completely supportive of our decision. He apologized for not seeing it sooner and asked if the girls could have supervised video calls. We agreed, cautiously. And Madison and Lily had their first one later that week. The joy on their faces when they saw each other confirmed what we already suspected. Their bond was real. The girls talked about everything except what had happened. Pets, favorite snacks. Lily showed off a new dress, and Madison held up a comic book. When Lily said, "I wish you could have come to Adventure World," Madison just smiled and said, "That's okay. I did something better." I don't think Lily realized what that meant, but I did. Madison had found strength in herself. We began planning small, structured meets. The first was a 1-hour picnic at a neutral park with both families present. Madison stayed close to me the whole time, but gradually warmed up enough to chase Lily across the grass. Eleanor tried to approach, but we intervened. Boundaries were still being established. Robert watched from the bench, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Afterward, Madison said it was okay, which was all we hoped for. It wasn't about reuniting families just yet, it was about Madison reclaiming safe spaces. Lily sent a note the next day, drawn in crayon, saying, "I love you, Maddie." Madison pinned it on her wall. Healing had cracks, but the light was starting to peek through. Our home became a sanctuary of new rituals. Madison and I created a Sunday tradition: pajama brunch and story writing. She wrote one, called The Brave Girl Who Wasn't Invisible, and when she read it aloud, my heart ached. The heroine didn't defeat Draga, she made people see her. That was the monster she'd faced. And now, she was fighting back with words. Scott started what he called Daughter Day, a rotating weekday where it was just him and Madison doing whatever she wanted. One week they baked cookies. The next, they built a birdhouse together. Madison began smiling more big, unguarded smiles that made us both exhale. She still flinched at loud noises or sudden movement, but it was less frequent now. We also had hard conversations. Ones where Madison asked, "Will they come back and try to make me scrub again?" We reassured her every time, no one would ever make her feel like that again. I repeated it like a prayer, hoping she'd believe it more with each retelling. She started to believe, not all at once, but enough. Eleanor and Robert's absence didn't leave a whole lot left room. Room for Madison to invite in people who chose her, who saw her. My sister flew in from Arizona, knee surgery and all, to spend a weekend with us. Madison made her a handmade Best Aunt award and wouldn't let her leave without promises to return. My sister kept that promise. We knew we couldn't erase what had happened, but we could drown it in enough love, laughter, and consistency that it faded in comparison. Every bedtime kiss, every unhurried breakfast, every gentle hand on her back was another stitch in the fabric of a safer world. And Madison was finally learning she deserved it all. The shift with Eleanor came slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. During one supervised visit, she brought Madison a small potted plant. "It's yours to take care of," she said gently. Madison accepted it, hesitant but polite. Later, she asked me, "Do plants die if you forget them?" I answered honestly, "Sometimes, but if you take care of them, they bloom again." That night, I realized she wasn't talking about the plant, she was talking about herself. Eleanor didn't force conversation that day. She observed, helped Lily with a puzzle, and occasionally looked our way with eyes that hinted at regret. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Scott noticed too, and later admitted, maybe she's finally trying. Really trying. At Dr. Carter's suggestion, Eleanor agreed to attend a solo therapy session. I was shocked she said yes. "I'm not good at this feeling stuff," she muttered on the phone, "but maybe I need help unlearning a few things." That was the closest thing to humility I'd heard from her. I held no illusions, but I also held space for the possibility of change. Robert followed suit a week later, attending a session on grandparenting through adoption. He came home from it uncharacteristically quiet. During the next visit, he sat with Madison and asked her about her favorite books, something he'd never done before. She told him about a unicorn detective, and he actually listened. For the first time, I saw a future where our boundaries weren't just tolerated but respected. Eleanor and Robert still had a long road ahead, but they were on it now. And Madison, wise beyond her years, was allowing them tiny steps closer, not because she needed them, but because she was healing enough to decide who got to be in her life. The extended family had not all come around. Some continued whispering that we were overreacting, claiming discipline isn't abuse and they're from a different generation. We ignored them. Others, like Michael and his wife, became our greatest allies. Michael even stepped in during a family gathering to shut down an aunt's thinly veiled jab. They protected their kid, period. There were moments I doubted myself, especially when faced with judgment from people who didn't witness what we had. But then I'd see Madison reach for Scott's hand at dinner or ask to reread The Brave Girl at bedtime. And I'd remember we did the right thing. Every single time we stood up for her, we rewrote her inner dialogue. Scott and I learned that healing wasn't just about undoing trauma, it was about replacing it with love. It meant saying, "I love you more," showing up more, and never letting a passive moment reinforce the lie that Madison was less than. She didn't need to earn her place in our family. She was our family, new qualifiers. One night, after a movie, she asked, "If someone else ever tries to make me feel small, will you still protect me?" My answer was simple. Always. That moment became a turning point for her. Trust wasn't just something she offered, it was something we had rebuilt, piece by piece, by keeping our word. Even in the hardest moments, we never backed down. And that consistency, that unwavering shield of love and protection, gave Madison the confidence to begin building her own. A child protected becomes a child empowered, and Madison was starting to walk taller in her own story. A year after that awful day, our family looked very different but stronger than ever. We still had boundaries with Eleanor and Robert, but now they were enforced with clarity, not emotion. Visits were earned, not assumed. Madison had a say in everyone. Her voice mattered, and she knew it. We celebrated her 9th birthday with a party she helped plan. She chose the guest list, the cake flavor, and the theme, Unicorn Explorers. Both sides of the family were invited, but with clear rules. Eleanor brought a thoughtful gift and asked to Madison before hugging her. Madison accepted, cautiously, then smiled a quiet peace offering. After the cake, Madison stood on a chair and made a little speech. "Thank you for coming to my party," she said, clutching Mr. Flopsy. "This year I learned that real family is anyone who makes you feel safe, and I'm glad you're here." Eleanor cried. Scott squeezed my hand, and I knew we had made it. We didn't erase what had happened. We honored it by learning, growing, and never letting it happen again. Madison's scars didn't define her, but they became a map of how far she'd come. Love had replaced silence. Support had replaced shame. And choice had replaced fear. Family, we realized, isn't a fixed circle. It's a garden you choose what to plant, what to prune, and what to remove for the sake of growth. And in that garden, Madison was blooming, bold, rooted, unshakable. Just when I started to believe we'd found peace, the silence broke. An email arrived from Eleanor with the subject line, "For Madison." My heart pounded as I clicked, half expecting blame disguised as concern. But the message was brief and, surprisingly, Tindera's scanned image of an old Henderson family photo, annotated with names and a line that read, "Maybe it's time we made space for new branches." I didn't know what to make of it. Scott was cautious when I showed him. "It could be genuine," he said, "or it could be another manipulation." I understood his hesitation, but something in Eleanor's words felt different. There was no defense, no justification, just a quiet offering. I didn't reply right away. I needed time. Madison's safety, emotional and otherwise, was still our top priority. Madison, for her part, didn't ask about her grandparents. It was as if her instincts told her she wasn't ready. When Lily called one Saturday morning asking to video chat, Madison agreed, but only if we stayed with her. During the call, the cousins giggled, shared school updates, and talked about their favorite movies. Madison smiled more than I'd seen her smile in weeks. After the call, she turned to me. "Lily's still nice to me. Can I see her again sometime?" I nodded, reminded that kids don't carry the same grudges adults do. "We'll make sure it's a safe space. But yes, sweet, you'll see her again." Slowly, I began to wonder if reconciliation on our terms was possible. But that didn't mean letting our guard down. A week later, Eleanor reached out again. This time, it was a handwritten letter delivered by mail. Madison spotted it first. "Is that from Grandma?" she asked, curious but wary. I nodded. "Yes, but you don't have to read it." She handed it to me. "You can read it first." The envelope was sealed with care. Inside was something I hadn't expected. Vulnerability. The letter began with, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I do owe you truth." I read it once to myself, then again with Scott beside me. Eleanor admitted she had clung to outdated beliefs about family and bloodlines. She acknowledged the harm, not just from what was said, but what was withheld: love, warmth, inclusion. She said she never meant to hurt Madison, but now understood that intent doesn't erase damage. It wasn't perfect. Parts still sounded defensive, like she was wrestling with the shame but couldn't fully surrender to accountability. But it was a start. The tone had changed: less pride, more remorse. She said she was in therapy now, that she'd started writing letters to Madison, though she wouldn't send them unless we said it was okay. Scott exhaled deeply when we finished. "This isn't just damage control," he said. "She's actually doing the work. For the first time." I agreed. "Still," I added, "we go slow. She doesn't just walk back into Madison's life because she finally woke up." He nodded. "Madison leads this. We follow her cues." And that's what we did. When we asked Madison if she wanted to hear part of the letter, she paused before saying yes. I read only the last paragraph, aloud, the part where Eleanor said Madison deserved to feel wanted, celebrated, and safe, always. Madison didn't say much. She just hugged Mr. Flopsy a little tighter and whispered, "Maybe Grandma's learning." It was more than I expected. We kept the momentum going cautiously. Madison wasn't ready to meet Eleanor again, but she agreed to send her a drawing. A picture of a tree with a heart at the center. Underneath, she wrote, "Families grow like trees." I mailed it with a post-it that said, She's not ready for visits, but she's listening. We arranged the first in-person meeting at a local park, neutral ground, familiar space. Madison agreed only because Lily would be there, and because we promised to stay by her side the entire time. Eleanor and Robert arrived together, visibly nervous. It was the first time I'd ever seen Eleanor without a rehearsed smile. She looked uncertain, even small. Lily ran to Madison with joy, and the two hugged like nothing had ever come between them. The adults, however, tread carefully. We started with small talk. Robert complimented Madison's art, saying he'd framed a last drawing she sent. Eleanor stayed quiet until Madison asked a question about the ducks in the pond. "They're funny," Madison said. "Like little feathered spies." Eleanor laughed, genuinely, added, "That's something your daddy used to say, too, when he was your age." Madison glanced at her, expression unreadable, then nodded. "Maybe that's where I got it. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was interaction. And in that moment, it felt like a breakthrough." Eleanor didn't ask for a hug or offer gifts. We kept the visit, short 30 minutes. Madison was tired afterward, but not withdrawn. "That wasn't too bad," she said on the drive home. "Still feels weird, but okay weird." That was enough for us. We celebrated quietly with her favorite dinner and a movie night. Progress, we'd learned, often came in whispers, not declarations. That night, I journaled everything, every word, every glance, every smile. These were the seeds of something new. Not reconciliation, not yet, but the beginning of respectful coexistence, and most importantly, it was happening at Madison's pace, not theirs, not ours, hers. In the months that followed, we introduced carefully monitored contact between Madison and her grandparents. These brief moments, an hour at a restaurant, a walk in the park, were closely observed. Robert appeared to be making a genuine effort, listening more attentively and avoiding comparisons. Eleanor, though slower to shift, kept her tone in check and followed our boundaries. Madison, sensing this change, began to relax, though she remained cautious in their presence. We encouraged these meetings only after thorough conversations with Madison, always reinforcing that her comfort came first. If she ever felt uneasy, the meeting would end without question or debate. That simple assurance gave her a sense of power she hadn't felt before. Therapy helped her identify early signs of discomfort and gave her the tools to express her feelings. It wasn't about forcing forgiveness, it was about honoring her needs. Lily became a silent bridge between the strange generations. Her innocence allowed Madison to see family in a new way, unburdened by the past. The girls developed inside jokes, secret games, and a strong alliance that reminded us what family could be. Their relationship felt like a new branch growing where an old one had snapped. And in that fragile regrowth, there was hope. Eleanor began to seek help on her own. She asked Dr. Carter for individual sessions, admitting she had never questioned her inherited beliefs before. It was a slow journey, but we respected the effort. She apologized again, this time with more clarity, more humility, and Madison nodded without rushing to say it's okay. That pause held power. It meant Madison was healing on her own terms. By the time Madison's school held its year-end open house, the dynamic had subtly shifted. Eleanor and Robert attended, brought appropriate gifts, and waited for introductions instead of inserting themselves. Madison chose when and how to interact. She introduced her grandparents to her teacher with quiet confidence, no longer seeking their approval, but offering her own terms. That moment stayed with me for weeks. True healing didn't come in a dramatic revelation, it unfolded through a series of small, intentional moments. Madison helping Eleanor bake cookies and saying, "You can use my recipe." Robert asking her to teach him her favorite card game. These weren't grand gestures, but they felt monumental in context. They weren't just participating, they were meeting her in her world with curiosity instead of control. We made a new tradition, monthly family game nights with rotating hosts. The first few were rocky. Eleanor struggled not to praise Lily disproportionately, but she caught herself. When she once commented that Lily was just naturally gifted, she looked at Madison and added, "And you have a gift for kindness. That's just a special." That balance mattered. Madison's quiet smile was proof. Scott and I had our own healing to do. He grieved the image of his parents he had carried for years, realizing they'd never been who he wanted them to be. But maybe, he said one night, they can become who she needs them to be. That reframing helped us both lean into the slow, messy work of rebuilding without pretending the hurt had never happened. We didn't erase it, became part of our history. At one therapy session, Madison asked Dr. Carter, "Can people stop being mean if they really want to?" Dr. Carter smiled gently and said, "People can change, but they have to work for it, and you don't have to trust them again until you feel safe." That message shaped how we approached every interaction going forward. Madison led. We followed. Some days still brought tension, awkward pauses, emotional weight lingering in the room, but they no longer defined us. The home that once held echoes of pain now rang with laughter again. Madison's confidence blossomed in school, friendships, and even public speaking. "I used to feel invisible," she told me once. "Now I know I'm not." 1 year after that unimaginable day, we gathered to celebrate Madison's 9th birthday. The party was filled with bright balloons, a homemade cake, and faces that had earned the right to be there. Eleanor and Robert brought a gift that Madison had requested, a beginner's pottery wheel. "I remembered you said you liked working with your hands," Eleanor said softly. Madison nodded, accepting it with grace. The party wasn't perfect. There were moments of discomfort, reminders of the journey we'd taken, but there was also laughter, music, photos where everyone looked genuinely present. Madison beamed as she unwrapped her gifts, hugged her friends, and proudly wore her birthday crown. There was no need for comparison anymore. She was finally seen. After the guests had left and the dishes were cleared, we sat together as a family. Scott held Madison in his lap, brushing icing from her nose. "What was your favorite part of today?" I asked. Madison thought for a moment, then said that everyone came because they wanted to be with me, not because they had to. It was a simple sentence, but it hit me like a wave. We had created that space. Through boundaries, love, and persistence, we carved out a place where Madison didn't just exist, she belonged. Not as a second choice, not with a disclaimer. Fully, completely, beautifully ours. Watching her blossom reminded me of how fragile, yet resilient, children can be. How one act of protection can alter a child's entire sense of self. As we tucked Madison into bed that night, she whispered, "Thanks for fighting for me, Mommy." I kissed her forehead and whispered back, "Always," because that's what family does, not just the kind you're born into, but the kind you build, nurture, and protect with every fiber of your being. This wasn't the legacy we started with, but it's the one we chose. If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for hearing our story, for bearing witness to a moment in time that changed the course of my daughter's life. Maybe you faced something similar, a moment when you realized someone you trusted was failing your child in ways too quiet for others to notice but loud enough to echo in your heart. Maybe you've wondered whether standing up would be worth the cost. Let me be clear. It always is. Your child doesn't need perfection from you. They don't need a flawless home or a conflict-free life. What they need is to know you're in their corner, even when the world feels unfair. What they need is to see you act when it's easier to stay silent. Because the message you send in those moments lasts far longer than any apology ever could. We often think love is passive, gentle, accepting, forgiving, but sometimes love looks like drawing a hard line. Sometimes love sounds like no, not my child. And if this story has stirred something in you, I want you to know you are not alone. Thousands of parents are navigating these invisible battles behind closed doors. And when we speak up, we light the way for others to do the same. So I want to ask you now, have you ever had to protect your child from someone within your own family? Did you set boundaries? Were you supported, or were you made to feel guilty for doing what was right? Share your experience in the comments. Your story could give someone else the courage to act. Let's build a space where we uplift one another and rewrite what family truly means. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. Subscribe for more powerful true stories and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And if you'd like to support this channel, consider leaving a super thanks. Every bit helps us continue telling stories that matter. Until next time, remember, love is louder than blood and truth is louder than tradition.